I guess I want to start with first the biggest thing, which is how would you assess the current health or state of American politics and democracy?
Start with an easy one. Well, look, thanks for having me, and thanks to the Padilla program. We spell Padilla a little bit differently in South Texas, but it's a cool concept, and for those, if you're not participating, look through those classes, because the only way we're going to continue for another 247 years is if we have educated individuals that are willing to have these conversations, and so you have a great opportunity to do that here. Democracy is fragile. It's fragile today. It's always been fragile, and I think that's the realization that a lot of people are coming to. I oftentimes talk about my experience when I was overseas. So my job, Texas A&M University, went into the CIA right after graduating. My job was recruit spies and steal secrets. Best job on the planet, by the way. And also for the young women in the crowd, not only did I recruit spies and steal secrets, I managed other people that recruited spies and steal secrets. You know who my best officers were? The women. Yeah. So we always hear about James Bond, but Jennifer Bond is way cooler and a better officer. I just put that out there for those of y'all that are looking at future careers. But the experience of being overseas, 2 years India, 2 years Pakistan, 2 years in New York doing interagency work, year and a half in Afghanistan, and then a lot of smaller trips in between. You saw a perspective of our country from other people's eyes, and you realize that democracy doesn't exist everywhere, and you come to realize how important and unique America is, and so it's fragile, and it always will be, it always has been, but the way, and I think the solution to this, and I will say this also, this may not feel like it, but it's actually worked. Whether you liked and supported President Obama, or you liked or supported President Trump, those that didn't like President Obama, when you look at all the things President Obama wanted to achieve, he only had a handful done. Same thing for Donald Trump. At the end of the day, I wish more people would have certified the election on the night of January 6th. It was still certified. And I'm one of the few that I do consider what happened on January 6th to be an insurrection. I've gotten in debates, and we can get into that at some point. But the way we strengthen democracy is we have to have an engaged electorate. It's that simple. And you can't just engage in November. Last election cycle of 2020, 67% of Americans voted in the general election. That's a high watermark of our elections. But in 2020, only 23% of Americans voted in primaries. If you don't like your options, and if you think our options are crap in November, it's because you didn't participate in March, April, May, June, July, and August, right? And so more people getting involved in primaries, you're going to see the electorate change. And I'll give you some math. The average number of people that voted in a contested primary last cycle was 60,000 people. 30,000 people decided 92, on average, 30,000 people on average, decided 92% of House seats last cycle. Because 92% of House seats, 401, are decided in the primary. That's crazy. Like, so that means that, and those are some of the craziest people that live in the district. So if we got more people voting in primaries, you'll change this and you'll strengthen democracy. And I think that's why. And so my answer today is the same that it would have been 10 years ago, and it will be the same 10 years from now. It's fragile. It's always will be fragile. But we have to make sure that we have an engaged and active electorate.
I know that everybody thinks about January 6th and thinks about some of the candidates running for office this cycle. Do you think the GOP, your party as currently constituted, is a threat to democracy? Given that I think that I was in the post of the Times just did an analysis that was like 289 or something like that. Republicans on the ballot still denied the outcome of the 2020 election.
So let me be clear. President Biden won. Okay, like just no question about that. Shouldn't be. And what I remind them is that Donald Trump lost the House, the Senate, and the White House in 4 very short years. And he didn't lose it because of something happening at the ballot box. He lost it because of an inability to grow his message and his brand and the Republican brand with the largest growing groups of voters. Now, are there some people that are going to potentially be threats to democracy? Sure. Is the party as a whole? No. And also, we got to define some of these phrases. Everybody talks about the party. What is the GOP? Some people decided at the GOP or the senior most elected people on a national level. Others would say it's the actual party apparatus that's run by Ronna McDaniel. It's a tongue twister for me. That's the party. I take a very broad view. The party is the people that would vote for a Republican. And so when you take that view, despite all these things that you want to read in headlines, why are Republicans going to take back the House in a very significant way? Why in a place like Georgia? And I'm not going to, I talk about Kemp and Stacey Abrams, Governor Kemp and Stacey Abrams. Governor Kemp is probably going to win that election by about 10 points. Significant increase in the electorate and votes in this cycle, in a non-presidential election year, when the advantage usually goes to Democrats. It also shows how terrible of a candidate Herschel Walker is, because if he's in essence losing from that Republican vote by about 12%. So 12% of people aren't going to vote for him. So the point is, Kemp is probably where a lot of them saying, and he was one of the few that had to actively fight against that issue. So there's a lot of people. My problem is there are more people that are interested in chasing clicks than they are in solving problems. My social media footprint would be 100x what it is today if I said crazy things. And trust me, my digital team is like, Will, I need to say this crazy. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna say that crazy thing because that's not good. None of y'all in this room, y'all are a smart, educated group. None of y'all have ever clicked on an article that said Congress worked. Right? It's like something happened, somebody threw this, Matt Gaetz did this thing, what's the lady from the, yeah, she said something wild, right? People are clicking on that. But again, most people aren't that way. And so if this notion that this was such a huge overwhelming threat, the majority of the country, about 44% of people that don't vote in primaries, that are going to vote in a general election, where you're going to see an overwhelming number of vote for Republicans, that wouldn't necessarily be.
You mentioned in your book that you think that the GOP has to get away from election denial and has to get rid of voter suppression and getting bigots, frankly, out of the party. But do you think that since your book came out, you worry that people like Doug Mastriano here in Pennsylvania, Carrie Lake in Arizona, that things are not getting better, they're getting worse? because of that 20, the primaries.
So pardon my language. What I actually said is don't be an asshole, don't be a racist, don't be a misogynist, don't be a homophobe, don't be an Islamophobe, right? Like all those basic things that we learned when we were in kindergarten. So look, some of these people are going to win. Now, I can make the argument. Let's take Arizona. You talk about Carrie Lake. So Carrie Lake and her opponent are within the margin of error. Summary of polling for the last couple of months has shown them each going up and back by about 1 point. Doug Ducey, the previous governor, won by 13 points. He won by 13 points at a time when my friend Martha McSally lost by 3 points to Kristen Sinema. And then we go back to 2016 when Donald Trump started, criticizing my man John McCain. Donald Trump won Arizona by 3 points. John McCain won it by 13. So it's like my argument is you're making it tougher on yourself with some of these positions to try to get out of a primary. You can look at Ohio. Mike DeWine, the governor, is going to win by 10 points, maybe more. But it looks like J.D. Vance, the Republican, could be beat, and Tim Ryan, the Democrat, someone I started with when I was in Congress, has been consistently up, but within the margin of error. So yes, some of these people are going to win, and you have success in a primary because you're driving out some of the most extreme. But you're seeing elastic success in November, and then I would also turn this around to my Democratic colleagues. Despite all these things, why are y'all getting beat? Like, look, in South and West Texas, you are going to see record turnout of Latinos for Republican candidates. If it's not record turnout, it's going to be near record turnout. Why? 3 things: energy, law enforcement, and the border. About 40% of people that are along the border, their job is based in oil and natural gas. So when you think the other party is against your livelihood, that's a problem. Another 40% have someone connected to law enforcement in their family in some form or fashion. So if you're seen as anti-law enforcement, you deal with that. And then third, the border. Look, what's happening on our southern border is indeed a crisis. It started under Donald Trump. It's gotten worse under President Biden. And border security for people that live along the border is actually a public safety issue. When you have 14,000 people living under a bridge, that's a problem. When you're releasing people that don't have any contacts or resources into El Paso, and you have 1,000 people on the streets, what's going to happen? And so that's why you see Democratic mayors, county judges, city council members. Was that?
No, it was a chair.
Oh, it was about chairs. I was like, they're like, no, wrong. I'm like getting fact checked real time.
We have to work on the hinges on one of the chairs.
And so when you have Democratic elected officials that have been dealing with this crisis for 3 years, so there has to be some soul searching within the Democratic Party as well about why are they, and again, this is from someone, I'm a Republican, period, full stop. I disagree with many of my Republicans. On some things, I agree on others, but where we need to get to is we have to have a real competition of ideas in November to talk about some of these challenges that we have. Look, it should be simple. No classified documents in your hotel room, right? We shouldn't have to have a debate on that, right? Slavery happens. Racism happened. My parents live in the home they live in because it was the only place that would sell to an interracial couple. So I was not able to go to the best schools, right? Like there are ramifications of these things, right? These things happen, we should talk about them, right? But the way you talk about them is by not segregating third graders by the color of their eyes or the color of their hair, right? Like, because we need to be talking about, should we be able to make designer babies? That's gonna come. Like the technology exists where we can program DNA like computer code. How do we defend? None of y'all know what Y2K is. Actually, this guy does, guy with the gray hair, Star Wars guy may know what Y2K was, right? Are you watching Andor? It's a good show, Y2K, I was in my fourth year. I took a victory lap. It took me 5 years to finish. I was in San Antonio, Texas, and I was scared to drive to Dallas to see my girlfriend because I thought pandemonium was going to hit. And ultimately, here was the problem. Computers, programs coded the year with only 2 digits. So when it hit 2000, the computer and the programs were going to think it meant 1900, which was going to screw up a whole lot of calculations. Okay. Took us 3 years, $7 trillion to solve, going from 2-digit year to a 4-digit year. Quantum supremacy is going to make that issue look like a tickle fight. The ability for our adversaries to change and break all of our encryption of our communications, of our financial systems, of everything that we do. Like, this is a real problem, and it requires us to figure out how to protect against. Like, these are some of the issues that we have to be spending on. And the only way we're going to do that is if we have a true competition of ideas. That's why I want 2 strong parties, right, that are talking to the majority of the country, not a small section of their French.
You mentioned in your book that for those who didn't see it, Will and Beto O'Rourke live streamed a very long drive from San Antonio to Washington when their flights got canceled because of a snowstorm. And you said that Beto refused to endorse your challenger in the next election, and he got a lot of blowback for that when he won. And what I'm wondering is whether Beto went far enough.
And I caught hell because I did not do the same with my junior senator from the great state of Texas. Yeah.
But I'm wondering whether it needs to go even further, whether we need to get to a point where we say, this person my party nominated, I don't care that they're in my party, they're nuts, they're not fit. Or on the other side, this person is actually trying to solve problems. I've worked with him or her, they're good people, and we should reelect them. Do we need to get to that point for the sane 80% or 70%, whatever it is, to actually win out?
Yeah, so if I had a magic wand, and for those that I represented 29 counties, 2 time zones, 820 miles of the border between Texas and Mexico. It took 10.5 hours to drive across my district at 80 miles an hour, which was actually the speed limit in most of the district. Learned the hard way, it wasn't the speed limit in all of the districts. But yeah, members of Congress still get speeding tickets, FYI. And so he represented El Paso. We knew each other. We worked on a lot of things together. He was in San Antonio doing a VA thing, and our flights got canceled. And he was like, "Let's drive back." And I said, "Sure." So we live streamed it. 35-hour trip, 31 hours in the car, 29 hours live stream. And this was right in the middle of a debate about repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act. We had like a 6-hour debate on healthcare. We talked about guns, we talked every issue imaginable. And look, the takeaway, something I had learned in my district, was that way more unites us than divides us. And the public actually want us to disagree without being disagreeable. And that experience is something you can't not see. And by the way, after that experience, we went to some of our most partisan elections that we've had in a real long time. I think the fix, if I had a magic wand, it would make no district more than +6 in either direction. +6 meaning, no district is more than 56% Democrat or 56% Republican. +6 is a jump ball. anybody can win that district. And that forces a competition in November rather than the primary. Now, I do not have a magic wand to give you one. Yeah, look, I wish, but this is why we need more people voting in primaries. And the difficulty there is the professional political class, people that run races, pollsters, all that stuff, they're focused on the likely primary voter. And the thing that makes you the most likely is your previous history. So there's a phrase called 4 of 4. If you're a 4 of 4 Republican, that means you voted in 4 of the last 4 Republican primaries, the same for Democrat. Those are people that are going to come out. You know how to move those people. But that group that votes in generals but not in primaries, there's a whole number of reasons why they don't vote or what would get them out. And they are harder. The cost of acquiring that voter is probably 3 or 4 times more. And so lazy politicians only talk to those folks that they know are going to come out. And so if we and here's why I won. I'm a Black Republican in a 72% Latino district. Nobody thought I had a chance in hell in ever winning. And when I won, everybody was like, it was a fluke. He's not going to win re-election, right? And the reason I was, and if every Republican voted for me, I would still lose. I needed to get independents. I needed to get Democrats. And that's where I saw problems. And so that resonated with people come November. And so if we had a system like that, if people focus on those things, then I think our outcomes, we would like the outcomes better, and we would see more people valuing solving problems than dropping bombs. Because now, as people are trying to grow their social media footprint and do small dollar donation fundraising.
One last question about kind of the GOP, but also the state of politics most broadly. It seems like there was once a time when there were red lines. If you cross those lines, the party establishment, the leadership in each house, the RGA, Republican Governors Association, or DGA would say, we're not supporting this person. And now you have the RGA pouring millions into Kerry Lake. You have, Kevin McCarthy campaigning with people who were, frankly, one of them that they already had to cut off because he lied about his military service in Ohio. Are we at a point where basically everybody thinks, oh, if you've got the right letter after your name, you're good? And is that, how do we go back to the old way where there was at least some standard of decency and competence and those kinds of things that should be kind of baseline?
Yeah, and I think part of it is, what are those baselines? Like, it shouldn't be hard. When I was in office, we got rid of, we took, it's Greg. Steve King. Yeah, I'm glad I forgot his name, that guy. This guy was racist, right? And he got kicked off some of his committees. That happened to Marjorie Taylor Greene in the beginning, but now she's kind of finding her way back. It's what's always wild to me. So representing a 50-50 district, 50% Republican, 50% Democrat, no matter what I did, half the district was upset with me. And that was actually very freeing, because for me, I had a very simple choice. Tell people what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I promised to show up. So I showed up everywhere. I literally hold the records for the most town halls and all this kind of stuff. And don't be afraid of your positions, and then be able to explain it. But what's always shocking to me is a number of politicians that are afraid of people getting upset with them. It's like, you're in politics, right? Like, what are you worried about? Like, this is, you of course people are trying to cancel you or criticize you, right? So, like, calm down. And so part of this is this fear of, oh, this person has a big following, they're going to be criticized. I just think it's not being values based, right? And again, I'm not always trying to get into the both sides debate, but you see this with some of the anti-Semitic stuff that's happened in the Democratic Party, and leadership of the Democratic Party has been afraid to answer some of that. It's probably not happening as much, if I gotta be honest on that, but it is. And so, like, let's know what your values are. articulate those values, and I think that's a winning suggestion. If people were to recognize the Republican Party as a party based on values, right? And those old school values, which I apparently are old school, that freedom leads to opportunity, opportunity leads to growth, growth leads to progress. If we're actually seeing this, it's going to lead to more success in November. And right now, this notion that the pendulum swings every 2 years just by a little bit, we can't sustain that at a time.
You mentioned in your book, you were talking about police reform and some of the common sense things that you wanted to do. And you also say that if we reduce polarization, improve democracy, or that you say that when these extreme positions, defund the police, things like that, get into the public debate, we don't have nuance, we don't have thoughtfulness. But given that you have monetary incentives and fame incentives in both politics, in the media, and also that you have well-meaning activists. I mean, you look at an issue like abortion or something along those lines, guns, where you have well-meaning activists on both sides who are utter extremists. How do we get back to those thoughtful, nuanced conversations? Because one thing that struck me is I think most Democrats actually don't want to defund the police, and yet they've been tagged with that kind of thing because there are those voices out there. How do we get back to that thoughtful kind
just
of
like most Republicans aren't racist, right? And we get tagged, or they get tagged. I'm not going to put myself in that category. So the defund the George Floyd, the post George Floyd world and immigration under President Trump are two examples of where this extreme position gets into our blood. It's hard to break away from it. And let's start with the immigration because it happened first. We all remember the kids in cages. The Trump administration was separating children from their mothers, putting them in cages as a way to be like, oh, no one's going to want to do that, so it's going to prevent people from coming. That's insane. 75 to 80% of Republican primary voters was against this policy. That's a huge number. And that's when the defund ICE started. Defund ICE started before defund the police. Defund ICE. And so now, if you were a conservative and didn't start with any other issue other than saying defund ICE is a bad idea, you couldn't have a nuanced conversation. And so the ability to work on that one particular issue where Republicans and Democrats agree, don't put children in freaking cages, we miss that opportunity because of that's some of that extreme kind of conversation. And the same thing happened with George Floyd. Like for me, it was shocking. I was the first Republican to speak up and say, like what had happened, that George Floyd was murdered. I was the first Republican to actually go to a George Floyd protest or a rally or an event. And look, it's not hard. You can be outraged that Black men are being killed in custody by the police, by white officers. You can be outraged by that. You can also be outraged by people looting and breaking stuff. Like these are not mutually exclusive things. And then we can also be thankful that the law enforcement is there allowing us and helping us, ensuring that we're able to exhibit our First Amendment rights, right? You can accept those three positions all at the same time. But then this issue of defund the police came in, then the issue of, oh, if you stop, if you prevent people from, firing, making it easier to fire cops, you're not supportive, and police unions were fighting and arguing against that. And that's what led to nothing happening on the George Floyd Policing Act. And it was super frustrating because, again, this is one of those things where the majority of the country is in one place, but because of the voting the coalitions of support that individuals have, this gets eroded. And the House is different because it's every 2 years. And what happens in House cycles drive the news cycle, which is why senators and even the president has to get involved in some of that, because the news cycle oftentimes is on issues is driven by the House.
This is, you mentioned that 70% of the country is in one place. And this is something that I think we see in polling over and over again on issues from legalizing marijuana to abortion, to a lot of common sense gun measures, DACA, on down the line, even on the hottest button issues, the 70% of the country agrees on a lot of things. And yet none of these things happen year after year after year. And so you talk about not getting rid of the baby with the bathwater, and that American democracy has served us well, and that the system has, done all kinds of good things. But do we need to tweak things? And I'm talking here whether it's in the Senate, the filibuster, or you recount in your book the fact that you had a bipartisan agreement on an immigration bill that you had a majority on, and successive speakers in 2 different parties wouldn't put it on the floor for a vote. So do we need some sort of systemic tweaks so that if 70% of Americans are at a spot, that the political classes are not standing in the way of that progress?
So it goes back to, if I had one thing, if you got 3,000 to 10,000 more people voting in a primary, that's 10%. That's a huge number, right? In presidential elections where people, or even in senatorial elections, where people are winning by 30%, right? Like that's a huge deal. And that's going to be fueled by people that actually want to solve problems. If we also had elected officials that are willing to talk to those people. The example I always use is Moana, the movie with The Rock, the cartoon. I was at the first time I spoke at a conference in Austin called South by Southwest, a huge tech conference. It's actually a movie music conference, and they added tech on. I'm on a panel with a bunch of YouTube stars. The other 4 of them combined had 1 billion subscribers on YouTube. I had 60. Right? And 3 are probably in this room, if I'm being honest. And one was the digital director for The Rock, and the movie in Moana was coming out that weekend. And she said, if Moana fails at the box office, are we going to blame moviegoers, or are we going to say it was a crummy movie? Now, I liked Moana. I thought it was a very delightful movie. I'm a big fan of The Rock. And we all know what we would say, like what she said. Her answer was, we would say it was a crummy movie. And she added, and this has always stuck with me, she goes, politics is the only industry where we oftentimes blame the purchaser, the voter, right? Versus the product, the elected official. And so I actually think we need more people that are willing to run and target and engage on those issues that people really care about, and not just the hot button issues. But structurally, the things that you're talking about in government, one that I would do is you got to devolve power back to committee chairs. It's only been the last 20 years. The appropriations bill is written by the Speaker of the House. The National Defense Authorization Act is heavily influenced by Speaker, or whoever the Speaker at the time is. It's not the committee chair. And when that power is shifted back to the committee chairs, they are going to work with their individual members to include other members of the opposite party because they're part of that committee. That was something that doesn't often get talked about, that a couple of years ago we can solve. The one thing that won't fix this problem is always thinking unified government is the way to solve the problem. Unified government meaning one party controls the House, the Senate, and the White House. That's actually the worst way to get things done. Any piece of legislation we can name, Civil Rights Act of 64, Voting Rights Act of 65, Americans with Disabilities Act, the Clean Water Act, First Step Act, I can go on. All of these were done when you had different parties in control of the House and the Senate. And so those are the things that are going to be, that it can be lasting. And that starts with people being willing to engage more than just 3% of the people that make up your winning coalition in a primary election.
I want to shift gears.
And by the way, all this is hard. Yeah.
If it was easy, we probably have done it already.
Well, I've done it. That's what we're trying to multiply and get more people to do it.
I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about policy and substance. You seem to support one you explicitly support in the book, and one I was inferring from what you said, paid leave and paying teachers more. And these are things that I would think that the majority of Americans, both parties, think are good ideas, but where I think that there would be a breakdown between the parties is how do you pay for them? And so I wanted to know your ideas on how do we pay for those things?
So what was always fascinating to me when I was in Congress, cities and governors and people would always come in the office and be like, you feds need to do this. But hey, you states, figure out how to pay teachers more. It's that simple. If it's a priority, do it, right? And so I am not an expert in state government. Y'all figure it out. And how Pennsylvania does it may be different from Texas, but if you say this is a priority, make it a priority. Paid leave, like, why is it so hard? Like our office, we had the maximum that you could possibly do, right? So this is the dollars and cents when it comes to this is not the part that people want to that is the actual challenge. And so for me, this is and you can't, people always want to look at, you never have just a conversation on that one thing. It's never a piece of legislation strictly on paid family leave, and this is how we're going to pass it, we're going to pay for it. It always is included in something else, and then the argument is always, oh, well, how are we going to pay for it? That's an excuse to vote no on something. And so we always want to try to get to a no instead of trying to get to a yes. And so the solutions on paying this, but you do it, and the key is, do you reduce other parts of a line item, right? That's where you would have to find the way to actually fund it. Is what are those other things that we're doing right now that we could be stopping to do that could fund these other priorities? I also think another way you get around doing this is you should have at a minimum a 2-year budget. I think it should be a 4-year budget. I think the president should submit for all 4 years. That gives some consistency where you know what you can do. And it also helps you reduce areas as well if you know you have a 4-year period to do that. The reason 4 years is going to be hard because people in Congress only have 2-year cycles, and they're not going to want to give something up. If you were to switch a speaker in the middle of a presidential term, you'd be removing some of that levels of power. So at a minimum of a 2-year budget, where you can address many of these things. Again, individual states, they can find different ways to pay teachers. I'm sorry, like this is a priority, and we should be concerned with student scores decreasing. We should be concerned with the number of F1 visa applicants. These are people from overseas trying to come to study in our schools are decreasing because it's one saying, hey, our schools are not as good, or there's other schools, other places that are equally as good and they can get to, and they don't have additional problems.
You mentioned in your book, you present the case of a constituent who came to you because she had multiple sclerosis and needed a specific type of wheelchair and got denied by the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare, CMS, bureaucracy. And you use that as a reason why we shouldn't have, government control of healthcare is bad. And I think it's a fairly compelling case, but there's a rejoinder to that. I know there's a political scientist currently working on a book that has hundreds of cases in that book of private health insurance bureaucracy doing the exact same thing. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how do we get to a healthcare system where it's doctors making decisions and patients aren't spending hours on the phone fighting with the insurance company that denied the necessary surgery or that kind of thing. How do we get the bureaucracy out of healthcare and let doctors make decisions and simplify this kind of stuff?
How many of y'all have a big screen TV? Do y'all? Why is a 90-inch big screen TV $1,000 when 20 years ago it would have been like $200,000? Price transparency. You got to know how much something costs, and so that was something that was something the past administration did, and it actually, some of that legislation got signed into law under Speaker Pelosi's watch on having some of that price transparency, so you know how much something costs. And if you know how much something costs, then you're going to be able to get some other service or to make sure you know what you're doing, right? And it starts with something that basic, and our system is not designed for that. Just because you have insurance doesn't mean you have access to health care. If your deductible is $10,000, which is more than what most people have in savings, you do not have affordable health care. And so if you had some of the smartest minds come in and say, hey, when we get to Mars, we're going to do healthcare a little bit differently, and they design something, it would look nothing like the system that we have today. And it starts with a simple principle like understanding price transparency, and so you know how much these things cost, and then you can start making decisions to go to people. And again, you may pay for something more expensive because you know that person is better, and so you're willing to pay that premium. That's okay too. But when we look at the VA system, members, like the biggest complaints a congressional office gets is usually from their veterans, questioning about their ability to get in and see their doctor. Right? That is government-run healthcare. Now, once they get service, the service is high standard, high quality, but getting access to it. Everybody always wants to use the UK, but everybody I know in the UK still has private insurance as well too. And so there's a way, the system is broken. It starts with understanding how much something costs. If I break my foot, I should know how much it's going to cost to go to one doctor to get it fixed. And then knowing that, and then I want to go there, I can figure out which insurance provider potentially provides that. Oh, and by the way, my insurance, whether I move from job to job, I should be transportable, right? And so that's another philosophy that I should be able to continue to have my set of doctors, and when I start, regardless of what job I'm in.
My favorite lunacy is that we've decided that certain parts of the body, like your teeth and your eyes, just don't count as health insurance. Yeah. Apparently, they're not part of you. Yeah.
And guess what? Getting braces, getting the teeth fixed, the price has come down pretty significantly.
You talk for a while in the book about how China is, the threat from China, the new Cold War that we seem to be descending into, have already descended into, that like you're sounding the alarm and people are not paying enough attention. Do you think that the CHIPS Act, the infrastructure bill that had money for the electric grid, are they good steps towards addressing, you talk about how much more China is spending on innovation than we are, and what else do we need to do to meet this challenge?
Look, it was a step in the right direction, yes, but it should have been done 7 years ago. And look, the Chinese government, I'm very clear when I say this, the Chinese government. My beef is with the Chinese government, not the Chinese people. Definitely not Chinese Americans. What our Asian American brothers and sisters have had to deal with in the United States the last couple of years is just unacceptable. Right? But the Chinese government has made it very clear. They're trying to surpass the United States as the global superpower in the world. Period, full stop. It's not my opinion. This is what the Chinese government has said about themselves in English in their own documents. And how they're going to do that? They're going to do that by being the global leader in a number of different advanced technologies: 5G, quantum, artificial intelligence, hypersonics, synthetic bio. There's about 14 different areas. And an authoritarian government can get somewhere first, because they have control of all factors of production. But can they stay in that position? And that's why I'm always going to take American entrepreneurship, creativity, freedom. I'm always going to take that over authoritarianism. But America has to be 4 times more effective and efficient than the Chinese government is. Why? Because we're 4 times smaller. When it came to the Cold War with Russia, they were never larger than us, and on no factor. And so they were never going to surpass us. And why should we care? America started acting like a global superpower at the end of World War II when we gave Europe a helping hand to rebuild after that war. But we became a superpower middle of World War I when when the American percentage of global GDP became the highest. We surpassed the United Kingdom. Now the United Kingdom's percentage of global GDP is 3%. Ours is 25%. And the Chinese government has gone from 1% to about 19%. And so this is going to affect our way of life. This is going to affect everything that we do. English being the lingua franca of the world and the dollar being, the most important currency. These are all positive for us. The fact that great American companies are being built here in the United States, all these things matter for us. So what's going to be required is a level of cooperation between the public and the private sector that we haven't seen before. That starts with having privacy law, right? I was involved in many of the debates with the Europeans on this thing called GDPR. This is super wonky. Basically what GDPR taught us is that we go to a lot of websites with cookies, right? Whenever you go on that website, it's like, hey, this has cookies. That's because of GDPR, and that's because of European regulation. And so it starts with that. Oh, and by the way, everything I do online is mine. I get to decide how it's used. I get to decide who uses it. So guess what? Everything that is going to be using my information, you better figure out how I'm able to determine how that stuff's being used. So, but here is while this is the largest and this is the biggest national security and probably existential challenge the United States is facing, here's a positive. It's one of the last bipartisan issues in Congress. The fact that CHIPS Act was able to get passed in an overwhelming way. Congress, they would call cybersecurity in a very vague way. I would probably say it's like the threat of technology. People understand that. They don't necessarily know what to do, but the fact that you have bipartisan support on those two issues makes me hopeful because, oh, and by the way, the Chinese government has their own problems, but this is going to determine whether or not the rest of the century stays the American century or not. And these problems are complicated. We talked about quantum earlier. We talked about biogenetics, AI. Look, AI, imagine a system that can know absolutely everything about you to your core. And they can do that on everybody in the world and then direct messaging via social media directly to you. I find that scarier than the Terminator, right? And so this could be a super powerful tool. Do you want a country that's derived this development who don't care about civil liberties? Or do you not, right? And so these are serious debates and how we craft these technologies to ensure that that communities that are going to be impacted by them are part of the process. It's complicated. And this is where I wish many of these conversations are going. And again, it's not sexy. That's hard to put in 280 characters and to get you all to mean tweet it, retweet it. But these are the real problems that are going to affect our way of life. Sorry, I rambled a lot.
No, do we need
this topic?
Do we need a supply chain that completely excludes China? Like domestic manufacturing and things?
So we need improved domestic manufacturing, and this was a failure. This was a failure 40 years ago. To be like, I talk about this in the book, made in China, even when I was in the CIA, meant knockoff. It was not something of high quality. It probably at closest would have been like stolen in America first before made in China. And so yes, we need to reestablish domestic supply chain. Why should we care about Taiwan? Okay, if y'all think the inflation and supply chains are bad now, wait until 70% of semiconductors are controlled by the Chinese government. And semiconductors are the building block of every piece of electronic, whether it's your family's fancy car, your smartphone, or your refrigerator, right? Like these are decided by semiconductors. Oh, that's one of the reasons why the Chinese are going to invade, the Chinese government's going to invade Taiwan. Period, full stop. The lesson they learned from Ukraine and Russia was go in heavy. The Chinese government believes the Russian failed because they tried to go into Ukraine on the cheap, and that when they go into Taiwan, they're going to go in real heavy. And the Chinese government, by the way, want to surpass the United States by 2049. That's 100 years of communist rule in China. The real deadline is probably mid-2030s, because by the middle of 2035, the Chinese government assumed that the Taiwanese will be better prepared to defend against an attack. So we're really talking about now and within a decade where we're going to see that level of that invasion that's going to impact all of us. Oh, and by the way, Taiwan's biggest ally, America, we don't even recognize them as a country. Explain that in a tweet, right? But anyways, so that's how all these things are connected. It's going to impact us. And we need smart people coming up with how do we get the public and the private sector to work together, but then also how do we work with our allies in other parts of the world.
Do we need a new branch of the military? I don't know what you'd call it, but a cybersecurity branch.
Well, you have Cyber Command, right? And right now, Cyber Command in essence is dual-hatted with, so the head of the NSA is also the head of Cyber Command. And at some point, these two are going to be, they're technically separated. Part of this is one is an intelligence operation to learn, another one is someone to do force. I think that is good for protecting across our shores. CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. I just now realize why don't they call it the CSISA? And I was involved in help with the legislation to actually create them. And I think they have done a significantly better than expected job in defending everything outside the .gov space. The fact that 2020 was the most free and secure election in the history of elections, despite what we saw happen in 2016 when the Russians trying to influence our elections, CISA is doing a good job. So I don't think there's other things that's needed. However, when it comes to understanding whether it's foreign policy or military operations, we got to think of cyber as a new domain. Just like air, land, sea, and space are domains, cyber is a domain. And anybody who's taken national security classes, you know about what's the DIME, the 4 levels of power: diplomatic, intelligence, military, and economic. I think there should be a 5th one, a C, cyber, because the tools are different. The skill set you need is different, just like those other domains of national power.
I'm going to ask one more question and I'll start working in the audience questions. How do you assess our handling of COVID, both the government and as a society? And what do you think we need to do differently to prepare for the next inevitable virus?
I'll try to get this answer short. I know we're going to get to some Q&A and we got big stack, y'all. So January, middle of January, yeah, late January. We were talking about COVID. We knew something was going on in Wuhan, China, and there was 91 American citizens living in Wuhan, China, that were going to get flown back to the United States. They came to San Antonio, Texas, and I was still in Congress at the time. City and the county freaked out. They're like, military, nah, what? COVID? We don't have a test for us. We don't know what this is. You're not coming on our streets, on our roads. Absolutely not. Like, it was this crazy debate. And one of the options was, look, we can put a MASH tent. This is like a military hospital that's literally in a tent. It's an old movie, old TV show, even old for me. I can't believe I'm using a MASH reference. It was like an old TV show in the 70s. We could put that in an open field and people are like, no, we can't do that because people are going to be freaked out. It is pretty shocking that we were able to get vaccines done in such a short period of time. I think that was a huge success. I think where the fact that the economy didn't crater. Was a success, but I think we are as poorly prepared for COVID-37 as we were for COVID-19. And you know, this notion of how do we do testing? How do we do preventative understanding? How do we have, like, we know how to see the virus in the sewer systems, right? And we're able to detect and determine that this is going to be on an increase, right? That level of being prepared to prevent something before becoming a thing, we're less prepared for, we're as poorly prepared for now as we were at the end of 2019. And part of that is everybody's tired from the regime, from that. And there's going to be another one. And so we'll know how to get a vaccine for it, because that was a positive. We're going to know how to have develop therapeutics. We're going to know how to triage. The real people that was amazing was our healthcare industry. I will say, I think cities and school districts are going to be a little bit better prepared. One of my most frustrating things, I don't think I talked about this in the book. I got all the superintendents of the school district in my district. And I said, do y'all have pandemic plans? Because I didn't know what a pandemic plan was. I was like, let's ask them, do y'all have pandemic? Yeah, well, we got it. Okay. Small towns. You send all of your bad patients, like really, like not bad, but like really tough, you know, heart problems, all that. You got to medevac them to San Antonio or El Paso. What happens when they can't take anybody? What's your plan? You got it, don't worry about it, right? So they didn't, right? And so I think some of those sub-state, sub-national organizations are going to be a little bit better prepared, but having a nationwide plan to be able to tackle and to detect something well in advance and then prepare the population, I don't think we're as prepared as we should be.
I went through the audience questions real briefly, and we have every topic, every policy topic you could possibly want to cover.
Yeah.
So we're gonna try to do this fast, cover as many as we can.
All right. Well, I'll keep my. I will get into my TV, you know, interview mode and tighten up my answers.
I'm impressed by some of the questions and the policy depth, but several people asked about voting systems, voting rights. How do we protect voting rights? How do we make it easier to vote?
Sure.
And there was one that asked specifically about ranked choice voting. What you
Yeah,
thought about
good
that.
question. I'll start with that one. It's interesting. So Andrew Yang's a friend, and he's always beating me over the head on this topic. And what's hard for me as someone who's been involved in electoral politics, right, and whose career is probably not over, how do you run? Right, so to me, this is a strategy thing. And I would say that does ranked choice lead to better outcomes? If a state wants to do it, Alaska, go ahead. I still believe that, like, if I had a choice, I think open primaries are better. Basically, everybody, they're called jungle primaries. California does it. I believe Louisiana does it. So everybody runs, and that means, you know, you don't have to choose a ballot. I think that leads to better outcomes than a ranked choice voting. But what I would say about the broader issue of voting rights, and when you said voting systems, the first thing I went to was the actual vote tabulation systems. The state governments, the people that are actually protecting the vote counting machines and all that, even the FBI, the NSA, and CISA put out a notice beginning of this month that there is not a fear of the tampering of these systems. Influence operations is probably more of a bigger problem. And right now, the most we're seeing is the Russian government trying to put, you know, or excuse me, people running for Congress, a lot of people running for Congress, majority of them on the Republican side, that are pushing some messaging that you see coming out of the Kremlin, really on an anti-Ukraine sense. So that's influence operations rather than vote tabulating. Make it easier for people to vote. So I never understood why people were talking about you should have the day off to vote. Well, it's like in Texas we got 2 weeks to vote, but not all states have that. Alabama, you can vote on one day, right? If you can only vote on one day, that day should be a holiday, right? I think at a minimum of 2 weeks of early voting over the weekend, you know, and even now, like I said, like my home state, you can vote in any precinct now. It used to be you have to only go to a specific precinct. It's like precinct 5037. Where the hell is that? You know, so we should be able to register online, right? Like, why is that so hard? And then those that want to make it harder for people to vote, here's a novel idea. Why don't you actually try to take your ideas to more people and grow the party than restricting people from wanting to vote?
Yeah. Someone asked,
but whoever the ranked choice vote is, grab me on the way out or send me an email and give me your reason of why you think it's. I'm trying to learn more about why people love it.
the one thing that I think it's better than I think we can all agree on is this Georgia runoff system.
Yeah.
Where if somebody gets to 50 because the libertarian gets 3%, we have a whole other $8 million election.
Right, and so, but here's my other question. The number of primaries where you can get out of a primary without having 50% of the vote, right? Ohio was that way. There's so many, and it's like, I'm sorry, like there are a number of examples of, and again, I care about this as a Republican because the nut would not have won in a runoff because 70% of the electorate actually voted against that person. And so that's an example where in a primary, having get to a 50%. Now, if you're not going to do that, that's maybe be aware whether this ranked choice is better. Like I think ranked choice is probably better than having somebody only going through with 30% of the vote. Setting policy here, by the way. Y'all are helping inform my own opinions. Yeah.
Someone asked what you would do about the housing and rent crisis, specifically mentioned Austin, but I know it's all over the country that we're dealing with this.
So innovation is going to help with that. I have some friends that run a company that are 3D printing homes. It's going to basically be a third of the cost, right? Now, how do you prevent those things being snatched up by, one of the reasons that houses are being driven is housing is being seen as an asset class right now. So it's an investment versus something you live in. And how do you deal with that phenomenon? And I think that's going to have to be done on a local by local basis. In some cities, Austin's one of them, is prevents you from being able to use like Airbnb or rent your house out to Airbnb. Is there zoning ways which you can further restrict that, because that is driving up and taking away some of the capacity that we need. We need 5 million homes. Like right now today, America has a 5 million home deficit. So the innovation of being able to build them cheaper, and then from a community by community basis, how do you make it so, because like in far west Texas, because there's a lack of housing, you can't get good teachers. One of these school districts was going to hire a new superintendent. Superintendent couldn't find a place to live, and so couldn't accept a job. So this is not a one size fits all solution to this problem. One thing, when people do have affordable housing, one thing that needs to be fixed is because affordable housing and addressing homelessness are two different things. And people that are in kind of that transitional phase, a lot of time in governments subsidized, and we're not doing a very good. I'm not doing a very good job. Sorry, I just thought of this. I'm not in the lightning round. I'm not in lightning round mode. I apologize. I'll wrap this one up. If you make more money and you're living in subsidized housing, your rent goes up the next month. That's stupid. Like, have it set. Like, you're not penalizing someone for moving up the economic ladder. You're trying to help them get that cushion so that they can then transition from that to something else. But don't impact them right away. That's something that, again, that doesn't address people that don't have access to housing, but are in it and want to see and want to move the economic ladder.
Somebody asked
Lightning round. Okay.
how to start a movement to require campaigns to be publicly financed. I'll broaden that and say, you know, we here in Pennsylvania, I'm pretty sure that over the two Phillies games over the weekend, every half inning, I saw the exact same two anti-democratic super PAC ads. What do we do about the fact that it seems like there are going to be like billions of money being poured in by the wealthiest into campaigns? How do we come up with some way to at least let the candidates control their campaigns, you know, and what's going on in some way?
Does anybody in this room want to publicly finance Doug Mastriano? There might be some. I don't want to put anybody on the spot here, right? So part of this is if you're going to publicly finance, then you know how you decide who gets access to it, and some of those public funds are going to ultimately go to some people that you probably wouldn't want your money and your dough going to, right? So that's an issue. Here's what I would say: the people that benefit, and this is someone. Look, the only way Will Hurd was able to run for Congress, like I didn't make money working in the CIA. My parents weren't wealthy. I showed an ability to raise money. And so I've never seen a race where one super PAC was in and the other side super PAC was. And the people that are making the money off of super PAC ads is two groups of people: the professional political class, the people that make those ads, and the freaking networks. Okay, like what drives me crazy. There's the most watched station in San Antonio, the ABC affiliate. My campaign, for the amount of money I had to spend on the cycle, paid for the entire operation of that TV station for a year. It's stupid, right? Like, and so how do you fix that? How do you correct that? Look, the dark money, not knowing who, like, this is the 501c4, not knowing who the people are that are behind it. You know, I think there needs to be some transparency in those kinds of things. Having, you know, why can a super PAC accept unlimited dollars, but I, as a candidate, can only accept $5,400? But also, if I was super wealthy, I can loan as much money to myself as I could. Right? Like it's complicated. I wish I had a clearer idea. And I always start with what are the principles we want to see. Transparency is one of them. But also, you know, preventing the professional political class and the TVs from making all that money. And actually, one, you can restrict. So a TV station has to charge all candidates the same price. And that price is almost like the lowest price. But a super PAC can get paid whatever. And so the TV stations are benefiting from those exorbitant prices, which is driving the cost of doing business up to the roof.
Yeah. Someone asked what you thought a workable, practical immigration policy would look like.
Yeah, 4 parts to it. I know it because I built one. Pete Aguilar, he always gets mad when I say this. He's like one of my best friends in Congress. He's a Democrat from California, and that gets him in trouble sometimes when I say that. Smart guy, great guy. We didn't know each other before, but everybody that was working on these issues was like, hey, us two should work, and it was in essence a 4-pronged plan. Solve DACA. DACA should be something. 72% of Democratic voters want to solve this problem. These dreamers have only known America as their home. They're already contributing to our economy. They're already contributing to our way of life. Let's give them a legal way of staying in the country. That's part one. Part two, streamline legal immigration. If Nevada and Florida needs hospitality industry people, we can increase that. If Texas and California need agriculture, we can increase that. If Massachusetts and Pennsylvania needs tech workers, we should be able to make this based on what the demand and what the need is. When you're at 3.7% unemployment, guess what? You need workers. And streamlining legal immigration. Oh, and by the way, America has benefited from the brain drain of every other country for the last couple of decades. Let's continue that. Third point, this is my lightning round. Third point is you got to address asylum and immigration courts. It shouldn't take 3 years for someone to go through the asylum process. When someone goes to asylum, about 40% of them are granted asylum. It shouldn't take multiple years. You should be able to get it done. I think you should be able to get it done in 3 months. And then for technology, we should know everything that's coming back and forth across the border. It's called operational control. Technology exists to do that. And to be frank, over the last 4 or 5 years, we're starting to see more of that in order to gain an operational control. And then we have to address root causes in places like the Northern Triangle, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. Right now, they're not feeding the most when it comes to illegal immigration, but they historically have been. And so we should be having an economic national security plan that addresses foreign aid within those countries individually, but also in these places as a region. You do all of those elements together, you're going to be able to see America continue to benefit from immigration. And we should be worried that when it comes to F1 visas, the number of people that apply to go to university, that we're seeing a decrease in that. And that's because there's other options rather than coming to vet schools like University of Pennsylvania.
Someone asked a question about whether student debt should be dischargeable in bankruptcy. So I'll broaden that to say, what do we do with the fact that we quite evidently, we have a student debt crisis. We also have a how do we fund universities kind of crisis and higher ed, and what do you think we need to be doing in that space?
It's a very specific question. And I would actually be interested in knowing a little bit more. And because if it's dischargeable in bankruptcy, right, there's a lot of other things that are dischargeable in bankruptcy. So why would that not be included? I don't know enough about that particular topic. What is the root cause? Why are people leaving universities with such huge debt and an inability to pay it back? Part of that is the university's fault. And I tried to pass a piece of legislation that said, if after 3 years, 50% of your graduates did not have a job or were unable to pay the loan, you weren't allowed to get federal funding. 50%, that's really low. Like, I actually wanted to be a much higher. My staff was like, hey, boss, there's no way that high number. Let's go 50. People lost their minds, right? I'm sorry. It should not, a student leaving a university with that amount of debt that has an inability to pay it back, that is improper planning on the university side or that entity side, and we should be addressing it. We should be addressing it there.
A couple of foreign policy questions. One person asked about normalizing relations with Cuba.
Look, we should be able to get to a point where that happens, but you have to trust the people on the other side, and that doesn't exist there, right? When I say the other side, meaning their governments. When their government shows a willingness to open up their own country, then that's when we could be talking about normalization. But okay, open the internet up, allow the free movement of people back and forth. Like, there's a lot of things that if the Cuban government was willing and interested, they could do that. I think America would follow.
Okay. Someone asked about the war in Ukraine and our role and what we're doing and whether we're doing the right things there.
My only complaint was we should be doing more. Look, I have been shocked in a good way, I guess, that Europe, NATO, everybody stood up to defend the Ukrainians. And if Ukraine does not win, and winning means the Russians are pushed out of all of Ukraine. Like that is what the end goal and the end state should be. Vladimir Putin invaded. We should have been stronger against his response to Georgia, when he was playing around in Georgia, the country of Georgia, the state of Georgia, and then 2014 in Eastern Ukraine in Crimea. And so we should be doing everything we can to help the Ukrainians defend themselves and push the Russians out. Vladimir Putin we have to be prepared for the use of nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons is within their standard operating procedure. It's called escalate to de-escalate, meaning if they're losing a war, lose a nuclear weapon, and that will get everybody to calm down. But in 70 years of war planning on both sides of the Atlantic, escalation has always led to further escalation. And so even the use of a tactical nuclear weapon, which would show probably less devastation than some of the devastation we've already seen. I know this administration has communicated to Vladimir Putin that what a response at a minimum would be. In my opinion, a minimum response is complete destruction of all his forces within Ukraine to include Crimea. And that is something that we need to get all of our allies together. But this really comes down to supporting freedom. And if we don't do that, then our role in the rest of the world diminishes significantly. And why should America care about what's happening in other places? And the more allies we have, the better. We have, giving Europe a helping hand after World War II, increased our ability to trade with them, increase our trading partner, it increased our way of life. Having friends is a good role, and America having a larger role in the rest of the world than most countries is actually beneficial to us.
There are a bunch of different questions that people asked about future of the Republican Party. Some, where do they go after the midterms? Who's the nominee in 24? But the one that I thought was most interesting of those said, pointed to the autopsy after Romney's loss, and pointed to Michael Steele's comments about broadening things, and basically said, the GOP was not receptive to this message 10 years ago, and in fact went in the opposite direction. Then why would they be receptive to your message today of, hey, let's broaden things, let's be more inclusive? Where does the party go from here, and how do you get them to be more receptive to that message?
Well, you get more people to vote in primaries. This is not about changing. So here's what I've learned about members of Congress. They're best in the world at one thing.
Getting reelected?
Following a trend. Nobody wants to be first. Most people don't want to be second. They're going to be fighting each other to be third and fourth, right? And so, look, you can reread the autopsy right now, and I've reread it recently. Same messages apply. This is about, and what I try to tell my colleagues, this is not about winning an election. This is, this period in history is strange, where the balance of power has switched so many times. Usually somebody's been in power for 12, 16, 20 years. That's what I want to see. And we have an opportunity to do that if we stop being crazy. And so that's the choice we have. And we have it at a time when I think the Democratic Party is incredibly weak as well. The Republican Party could improve its standing with women with college degrees who live in suburbs, people under the age of 35 in communities of color. We have an opportunity to do that. And there's examples of people that are doing it across the country. It's not getting a lot of play, because guess what? Nobody wants to see that remanufactured. I think that's ultimately what's good for the country. And the way you get other people to mimic that is to win that way. So what's going to happen? Look, in November, Republicans are taking the House back, period, full stop. I would say the Senate now is probably 50-50. If I'd be forced to say it now, I think we can still get it. It was a different story 2 months ago. But it is still in play. And the question on the House side is, and then what's going to happen after that? Kevin McCarthy and a lot of them are going to try to impeach Joe Biden. They're going to try to impeach Secretary Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and they're going to be doing all these things at a time when the economy is going to get worse. So if the economy gets worse and Republicans get blamed for being, not preventing things from happening, potentially shut the government down, all those kinds of things, then all of those problems that are squarely in the lap of President Biden right now, because he's in charge of the White House, the Senate, and the House, then Republicans get blamed for that. So even the victories in 2022, have an impact on 2024. Who's going to be the nominee in 2024? Who knows? I hope we're not deciding in November between two 80-year-olds. That's my hope, right? And guess what? That hope is going to get will get recognized if we get more people voting in. Nobody? Primaries. There we go. All right.
I'm going to ask one last question that's
Yeah.
a follow-up to that,
Yeah.
because it was all one of the note cards. Someone said, how do you get more people to vote in primaries?
Don't be a jerk. Don't be a racist. Don't be a misogynist. Don't be a homophobe. Go and talk to them about the things that they care about. People care about putting food on the table, a roof over their head, and making sure the people they love are healthy and happy. And it means different things in different ways. And so you can't have just this one national, narrative that's going to impact different people. That makes it harder. But you actually have to show up and talk to those folks, those 44% of Americans that do vote in general elections that don't vote in primaries. That's how we do it. And look, the only way, and I said this before, why you know the answer. That's what question I'm going to say. Why is America called an experiment? It's called an experiment because nobody thought it was going to work. It'd been 1,800 years before there was since a democracy had existed on the earth. Rome. Julius Caesar screwed that up when he became emperor. Right? Nobody thought it was going to work. And the issues we have to do today and address today to make sure we have another 247 years of uplifting and improving quality of life for all Americans, uplifting humanity, that pales in comparison to having to fight in Concord or having to storm the beaches of Normandy or fight hand to hand in fortresses in Mazar-e Sharif, right? What requires us to do is be engaged, vote in primaries, and start getting people that are going to be focusing on solving problems and not being bombed over. We can do that. And I feel proud about it. I feel good about it because we've always met the occasion. And I'm super, and this is why I come to universities, is because Gen Z, and I said this earlier today, Gen Z is suspicious of everybody. And that's a good thing to make sure we hold people accountable. So that's how we get it done.
Thank you.